we need to know the answers, because this community needs to find out lots of things about things that went on, how the whole crisis was handled.
Residents of High River, Alberta, are going to have to wait a little bit longer for the answers they want on the flooding, the door kicking, the gun grab. The report into this by the RCMP Public Complaints Commission has been delayed yet again to the end of October. Edmonton Sun columnist Lorne Gunter joins us now. Lorne, this is depressing news, but the good news is we're getting more information even before we find out about the report, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've learned a couple of new things. I mean, you and I have been watching this very closely now for over a year. And so we get little bits and pieces here and there. We got two of those little bits this week from an independent firearms researcher in Alberta, a guy named Dennis Young, who's been following this like a hawk. He's filed a whole bunch of access to information requests. And by taking the answers that the RCMP gave last week to MP Scott Reid's order paper questions, Scott Reid had asked this whole series of questions about who authorized this, what orders were you taking, under what authority were you operating. He got a whole bunch of responses from the RCMP, and Dennis Young has matched those up to things that the RCMP has previously said. And he's found that there are a couple of things in the order paper answers that were given to MP Reid that don't jive with what the RCMP had earlier said. All
right, so I want to show one of those. Question on the order paper from Scott Reid. What are the names, ranks, positions, units, and detachments of the RCMP officers who authorized or otherwise initiated the removal of legally stored firearms from residences? And the Mounties responded with, no one authorized or initiated the removal of legally stored firearms from residences in High River. But an ATIP from July 2013 showed that, yes, they confirmed that in some cases, firearms with trigger locks were seized. So that's a legally stored firearm. They were still taking them.
Absolutely. And I think that the problem here is that the Mounties are still operating under the 1995 rules that came out when Alan Rock and the Liberals first brought in Bill C-68. And that was you had to have each firearm trigger locked. You had to have it locked then in a locker. And the locker with your guns had to be in a separate room from the locked locker with your ammunition. I mean, it was this idea that somehow a shotgun shell was going to jump out of its case, slide into the chamber of a shotgun and blow somebody up. So they had this ridiculous laws. Over time, judges have said this is completely unreasonable. You can't do
And they've struck it down.
So what they basically said that legal storage is trigger lock in a closet. And that's where the Mounties were finding guns, and they were seizing them anyway.
All right. You've got questions about the RCMP saying that they number of people they rescued, because they searched 4,600 buildings, including more than 3,000 private homes. But they say that they rescued 38 people. But you note that they've got notes on rescuing 143 pets, but there's no notes detailing the rescue of a single person. To me, that says maybe they didn't rescue anyone.
Exactly, and they've changed their wording too, from rescue to assisted in leaving town. So it makes it sound like they were giving the bum's rush to people who were refusing to adhere to the evacuation order. Now, there are almost 330 people who stayed. Their part of High River wasn't affected. The lights were on, the sewers were running, the water was still going, the gas was still on, and so they stayed. And the Mounties, in report after report after report, that you can just see they're grinding their teeth that these people had the audacity to stay in their homes when they, the Mounties, had told them to leave. And so it's not, I start to think you got 143 pages about how they saved Fluffy and Fido and fed them and watered them and kept them at the detachment, and no pages on these alleged 38 rescues. I don't say they didn't rescue 38, but it's kind of suspicious after a while when you have all this documentation about pets, but somehow the pages dealing with these rescues of 38 humans don't exist, coming out in in access to information. It's just it's a little perplexing.
Also suspicious that we are delayed yet again, but we'll have to talk about that another time. Not looking good, Lorne, but we'll talk about it another time.
No, it doesn't. I'm a little pessimistic. Thanks, Brian.
All right. Thanks, Lorne. Now, a quick note on something that we'll be following up on tomorrow. Justin Trudeau talking about what we started the show on, and that is ISIS and what Canada's response should be. Here's what he said to a question earlier today.
Support a more extensive military role, possibly an air campaign in Iraq. think Canadians have been very clear that we're not interested in a combat role in Iraq. The Liberal Party is not supportive of any extension into a combat role. We think Canada's role should be strictly non-combat.
All right, in case you missed it in the question, Trudeau also ruling out Canada helping with airstrikes. He doesn't want boots on the ground. I get that, but saying no to airstrikes, he just wants to hug people? More on that tomorrow. Email me your thoughts on everything we're talking about. Byline@sunmedia.ca. More to come.